I'm going to play a little sound from Bill Maher, who obviously just loves this book and thinks it's, great, talking about how, according to him, it's socialism that built America. That this book is great, and it reveals that whatever we have, we owe to socialism. It wasn't capitalism or freedom that made America great. It was socialism. It was that we finally embraced the ideas of Marx, and that's what created the middle class. But now, you've got the left fawning all over this book. It's just, Marxism dusted off and rebranded. You put it in a different package, but it's the same old failed ideology. The left is going to eat it up, with a spoon. But here's an example. This is Bill Maher, HBO, right? Listen to what he had to say about socialism and America and the middle class and this book. Here, it's cut number 11.
Sure, it's wrong to try to, basically break down a 700-page tome into a few words, but I'm going to.
Let's do it.
Because, come on, everything's too long anyway. Movies are too long, books are too long. Basically what this guy is saying is that under capitalism, income inequality is inevitable. And that when we had a thriving middle class after the war, after World War II in the 50s and the 60s, that was the aberration. And by the way, the reason why we had a thriving middle class then was because of socialism. Because the tax rates on the rich then were 70 to 90%. And the house I grew up in was under the GI Bill.
Right.
It's because my parents were veterans and they could, that's socialism. That's all socialism. Socialism built the middle class in America. Deal with that, conservative.
I mean, come on. Come on. Does this guy really think that, everybody was poor in America until 1950 and 1960? That nobody could buy a house until the GI Bill? Is that what he really thinks? Does he really think that the middle class didn't exist and that it magically came into existence in 1950 because the income tax rates were jacked up? Is that what he actually thinks? This is unbelievable. The middle class in America was a byproduct of the economic growth that took place in the 19th century. That's what created our middle class. The prosperity that we enjoyed in the 50s was the payback from the freedom of the 19th century. That's where America's middle class was created, when we had no income tax at all. When it was pure capitalism, it was the higher taxes that began unraveling the middle class. It's the things that were introduced in the New Deal and later in the Great Society and the War on Poverty. That's when the middle class started to come down. That's when we started to reverse all the progress that had led up to our high point, our zenith in 1950 and 1960. And it wasn't the confiscatory levels of taxation that did that. It was the absence of taxation. Up until 1913, there was no income tax at all. And then up until the 1940s, the rates were still low and very few people paid them. All right, they got jacked up, and they were high in the 50s and 60s. But the reason that the economy didn't collapse was because those high rates were easily avoidable. Now, of course, all the things that we had to do to avoid those taxes were counterproductive and undermined our economy, but they didn't undermine it as much as paying the taxes would have. As unproductive as all the loopholes and the tax shelters made us, the taxes would have made us even more unproductive. But that's when Japan really got out. That's when we lost our edge during the 50s and the 60s. That's when all this manufacturing started to build up in Japan because Americans were too busy dodging taxes. They weren't making the investments that were being made in other countries. Why does Bill Maher think so many immigrants came to America when there was just nothing but capitalism here? Why did they risk everything? Why did they leave their friends and their family, come to a country where they didn't even speak the language, spend whatever money they had on a one-way ticket across the Atlantic, a week boat trip in steerage? Can you imagine what it was like to come across the Atlantic with nothing but the clothes on your back and then show up in America with no money and no knowledge of the language? Why did they do that? It was because of freedom. And obviously it couldn't have been bad, or they wouldn't have told their friends and their relatives to come over. But they kept coming. Masses and masses of immigrants came. And it wasn't because of socialism. It wasn't high taxes that built this country. If we had the type of high taxes that Bill Maher thinks built the middle class, if the founding fathers had started America with a 70 to 90% income tax, do you think we ever would have expanded beyond the original 13 colonies? The Native Americans would still be in charge around here if we had those kind of income taxes from day one. We would never have amounted to anything. There would be, in fact, nobody would have ratified the Constitution. That's for damn sure. Nobody would have been dumb enough to ratify it. But assuming they were dumb enough to do it, everybody would have left. Nobody would have stayed here. Nobody would have immigrated here because there would have been no opportunity. There would have been no capital. Nobody would have had any savings. Nobody would have had any investment. It had been the reverse. We'd have all, my parents, I'd still be living, I'd be living in Europe, assuming that I was still born. I'd be in Eastern Europe somewhere because none of my ancestors would have come here. Nobody would have come here. It's just amazing how moronic Americans can be, that people can think these kind of thoughts, have this kind of attitude. I mean, given all the money that we spend, that we waste on education, that we can produce somebody as ignorant as Bill Maher. And only in America, probably, can you succeed. Can you become so rich, yet be so stupid at the exact same time? Capitalism is the only place where a guy like Bill Maher can succeed. He can succeed despite the fact that he's an idiot. Because he's good at something, right? I mean, he's funny. He does his talk show. So despite the fact that he's an idiot, he can become rich. Right? Only in a capitalist society could a guy like that succeed. Where else? I mean, what else can he expect? But he doesn't even understand that it's only because of capitalism, or what's left of it anyway, that he's able to succeed and live the luxurious lifestyle that I'm sure he has grown very accustomed to.